Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for coming out. I appreciate it. I know it's probably difficult to make it and all that kind of stuff, but I really appreciate it. I really appreciate taking the time to come out and I don't know why you would want to listen to what I would have to say, but
we love you.
What's that?
We love you,
yeah. So this is an act of penance, that's what you're saying. Okay, fair enough. I'm on a hockey team, okay, and so they asked, we were in the locker room, and we talked about a lot of things. But one time we were talking about who knows the most about marriage, and there's a couple guys on the team who said, I don't know why we were talking about it, but they were saying that. And someone said, well, Father Phil probably knows the most about marriage. And then someone chimed up, yeah, because he decided not to get married. But in all seriousness, I really appreciate you guys being here. So thank you for being here. And it was from the Advancement Committee and from Pam, and I know Ron Durham from the school board. They approached me and asked me to do a series on the family, about how we can get more involved and how we can become more intentional about our Catholicism, particularly in a family context. So I'm again honored that they have asked me to do that. So we shall begin. So the title of this talk is Faith and Family, a Balancing Act, ? Forgive me, I'll have to wander. So a brief overview of what I'll be talking about tonight. First, the Christian Catholic view of family, what it is to be a family in a Christian Catholic context, and then contemporary family views. How does our society view marriage, view the family? And then challenges of living our duties as Christian parents, as Christian mothers and fathers. So really quickly, from the beginning of really philosophy, there's a discussion of what is the family. Aristotle, one of the earliest philosophers, says that the family is the basis of society. It's the unit of the society. It's the building block, if you will, of society. So everything else is based off of the family and family life. So if you remove that block, you remove society. You don't have a well-built, well-structured society. Anyone can tell you who builds things, you need to have a good foundation, right? You need to have a good foundation. You remove that foundation of the family, you remove society, at least a well-built, strongly built society. Now, anytime you see CCC, that means the Catechism of the Catholic Church, just so you know. The family is the original cell of social life. It is the natural society in which husband and wife are called to give themselves in love and in the gift of life. And so integral, obviously, then to family is marriage. A man and a woman united in marriage together with their children form a family. Fairly obvious, but important. So if we want to get at the heart of the family, then we have to get at, well, what in fact is married life? Now, here is an encyclical written on marriage. It was written actually back in the 30s, so some of the language in it will be a little bit dated maybe, but the idea is that I think it's still very true to this day. It's from the encyclical Casti Connubii, which means like pure love, essentially. Pure married love is what it means. And it was written about marriage. It was written about marriage. And here's what it has to say. How great is the dignity of chaste wedlock, venerable brethren. Brethren would be, back then, a term for everybody. May be judged. How great is the dignity of chaste wedlock, venerable brethren, may be judged best from this, that Christ our Lord, Son of the Eternal Father, having assumed the nature of fallen man, not only with his loving desire of compassing the redemption of our race, ordained it in an especial manner as the principle and foundation of domestic society, and therefore of all human intercourse, but also raised it to the rank of a truly and great sacrament of the new law, restored it the original purity of its divine institution and accordingly entrusted all its discipline and care to his spouse, the church. So he's talking on two levels. You have first it's the basis of society, but even more so than that, it's a sacrament. It's the basis of all human intercourse, of all human interaction. So the family, married life, is the basis of all we do. We are not here. We do not know who we are. We do not have an identity without our family. That's the basis of who we are. Even if our family is somewhat dysfunctional, that still defines who we are. Even if it's in the sense of via negativa. So even if we learn what not to do as parents from our parents, that's still defining us. So the point being is that our family is what defines us. It's the basis of our interaction with others. Marriage is at the heart of family life. Now, let's go to Christian marriage. What does it mean? What does marriage mean in a Christian or Catholic context? And one thing that's interesting is that we call it a sacrament. We call it a sacrament. What is a sacrament? What is a sacrament? A sacrament is an outward sign instituted by Christ to give grace. So there's something that's an outward sign, right? There's something external that transforms us internally. So baptism, we would say, configures us to Christ. We only receive baptism once in life. Marriage configures us to Christ in a particular and special way. In a particular and special way. So the sacrament of marriage is what makes marriage marriage. It's what makes it's our understanding of marriage. Here is the context from the Bible where we draw this our understanding from. Some Pharisees approached him, Jesus, and tested him, saying, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any cause whatever?" He said in reply, "Have you not read that from the beginning the Creator made them male and female and said, 'For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, no human being must separate.'" No human being must separate. So we have it from the words of Christ himself that the original meaning of marriage, the Christian meaning of marriage, comes directly from the Bible, comes directly from his mouth, comes directly from the voice of God, who Jesus is. So marriage, outside of that context, won't make as much sense. Won't make as much sense. We could talk about it in certain different ways. We can talk about it, and we will shortly, but it doesn't make as much sense outside of this context. Here's another encyclical written by Paul VI, Vianney Vitae. And here's what he said. "Married love particularly revealed its true nature and nobility when we realize that it takes its origin from God, who is love, the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth is named. Marriage, then, is far from being the effect of chance or the result of the blind evolution of natural forces. It is in reality the wise and provident institution of God, the Creator, whose purpose was to effect in man his loving design. As a consequence, husband and wife, through that mutual gift of themselves, which is specific and exclusive to them alone, develop that union of two persons in which they perfect one another, cooperating with God in the generation and rearing of new lives. The marriage of those who have been baptized is, in addition, invested with the dignity of a sacramental sign of grace, for it represents the union of Christ and his church." Just a reinforcement of what I was saying before is that marriage is the sign of love that God has for us in the world. That the sign that we have a Creator that loves us comes specifically through marriage. Through two people giving themselves to one another and loving each other. That's where marriage is. That's the heart of marriage. That's the heart of marriage. And this is a beautiful way, I think, of saying that. And we would say that we often talk about how, and I'll show you an illustration of this in a few moments, but there's often a connection between married life and how Christ is united to the church. So when Christ dies on the cross, he's united to his church. He founds the church. And the church is still in existence to this day. They can't be separate. Christ cannot be separate from the church. The church cannot be separate from Christ. And so marriage is a great sign of that. A great sign called the unity of Christ and the church. The unity of marriage is a sign of how much Christ is united to his church. Now, I want to briefly talk about love. Love. Father who is love. God the Father who is love is at the heart of marriage. One of the things when I do marriage prep for couples, I always ask them, well, why did you decide to marry each other? And they kind of sit there and for a second and kind of look at each other and say, well, he or she completes me. They have great qualities. They have all these things, and they're like, okay, come on. Finally, they say, eventually we get them to say, because I love him or I love her. It's like, that's what I'm looking for. I know it's a read my mind question, but that's what I'm looking for. And then my next follow-up question is, well, what is love? What is love? And for the most part, that stumps them. They'll talk about how it's, in some ways, it's a good feeling when the other is near. It's just being with the other, and those are all hopefully good experiences of love, but that's not necessarily what love is itself. If we want to find what love is, we have to look at God, the Father, we have to look at Christ, we have to look at Jesus. And what did he do? He came to this earth and died for our sins. That's love. I don't think he necessarily felt good about it, especially when he was hanging on the cross. Pretty sure it was really kind of probably painful. Point being is that love is actually a choice to will the good of the other. So I choose another person through thick and thin. I choose that person and they choose me. Now hopefully we have good feelings along the way. There's positive experiences. But that would be a sign of mutual love between two people. That's not the heart. That's not the core of love. You know, I think some of the most powerful witnesses of love is when I've gotten up and done marriage blessings at the end of Sunday Masses. People who have been married for 60 years and they're sitting there, they're still holding hands. 50, you know, that's awesome. I think that's awesome because do you think it was always easy for that couple? Absolutely not. Most of you, if not all of you, are married. And so you know that there are times that are difficult. There are disagreements. That happens. But that doesn't call into question love. Because at the end of the day, no matter how angry you are or upset you are at your spouse, you can still choose them. You can still choose them despite what you feel. And I like to talk about, too, how in marriage prep, because often they'll say, well, it's a nice feeling that when I'm with the person. Well, that's true. You know, you hope that happens. But I like to use the analogy, well, okay, when you're a little kid, right, you asked for the perfect Christmas gift. You wanted that perfect Christmas gift. And you got it. And it was awesome. It was the coolest thing in the world. And where was it a month later? In the closet with all the other toys, right? As adults, we're the same way, except our toys are just a little bit bigger and a little bit more expensive, right? So the point being is that marriage, at the end of the day, can't be based on just the feelings that we feel when we're around the other person. As I said, those can be good and those can help us elicit love. But at the end of the day, if we base our love on those feelings, the shine will eventually wear off. The shine will eventually wear off. Our marriage has to be rooted in the love of Christ, in the gift of one another to each other, choosing to love that person. Now, I want to quickly just run through the marriage rite. So we read this because you can actually learn a lot from it. Now, how many of you, for those of you who have married, how many of you remember what was exactly said during the marriage rite? Exactly. A few of you. If Amy, because what, you were nervous, you were excited, it was a scary moment maybe. All those things were running through your mind. So you don't sit there and have much time to reflect upon exactly what is being said. I remember when I was ordained, I still don't remember exactly everything that was said. How did you remember the Archbishop's homily? Oh well. That's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. But I don't remember what I preached last Sunday either. So here's how it begins. This happens right after the homily. So the presider addresses the couple. And now, the way that I like to do weddings, every priest does them a little bit differently, but if you're the congregation, and this is the altar, I like to have the couple stand up here. And I'll tell you in a moment, I face them, and I'll tell you in a moment why. And here's what the presider says. My dear friends, you have come together, and my dear friends is addressing the couple. You have come together in this church so that the Lord may seal and strengthen your love in the presence of the church's minister and this community. Christ abundantly blesses this love. He has already consecrated you in baptism, and now He enriches and strengthens you by a special sacrament, so that you may assume the duties of marriage in mutual and lasting fidelity. And so in the presence of the church, I ask you to state your intentions. And then you say both of their names. So, Jack and Jill, have you come here freely and without reservation to give yourselves to each other in marriage? It's an important question. The answer is we do, or we will, rather. We will. Have you come here freely, or we have, rather. That's the, we have. We have come here freely and without reservation to give to each other in marriage. That's an important moment, because I'm not marrying the couple as the presider. The couple marries themselves. The couple marries themselves by their profession of love for the other. And in order to have that profession of love, you need to be free to do it. You need to be free to do it. So that's an important moment, and it's the reason I have the couple stand up there is that it's not me that is marrying. It's the two that are marrying themselves by their consent and then by their profession of vows. So then the next question, will you love and honor each other as man and wife for the rest of your lives? We will. Will you accept children lovingly from God and bring them up according to the law of Christ and His church? We will. Since it is your intention to enter into marriage, join your right hands and declare your consent before God and His church. And then come the vows. I, Jack, take you, Jill, for my lawful wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. And then I, Jill, take you, Jack, for my lawful husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. And then the priest says, the presider says, you have declared your consent before the church. May the Lord in His goodness strengthen your consent and fill you with His blessings. What God has joined, men must not divide. A direct quote from sacred scripture. So, the point being is that marriage is specifically meant for this context. Specifically meant for the context of Christian love, of the love that Christ has for us. That's the point of it all. And let me show you an image here, which I find interesting. It's the way we live it's the way our theology is represented by our architecture, actually. Does anyone know what this is or where this is? Of course John would. Anybody else? He's like that little kid that always has his hand up and knows everything, you know? St. Peter's, yes. It's St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. And does anyone know what this is called? Yes, a baldacchino. It's called a baldacchino. And does anyone know what it represents?
A marriage bed.
Yes, it does. It does. It represents back in the day when you didn't have much heat in your house. You had drapes over your bed, and so that's what kept you warm. This is a representation of that, and this, here it is, right here. That's the altar. That's the altar. So this is representing, this thing, this baldacchino, which represents the marriage bed, the union that happens between a man and a wife, is the same that the Lord's union with us in the Eucharist. In the Eucharist. So that's what married love should represent. That's what married love should represent. And so that's just a beautiful, I think, image of what married love is. And it's a reminder every time you see one. We used to have one actually in our cathedral in Milwaukee. We do not anymore. But every time you see one, you're reminded of what it's like to be joined to another person. And that may mean there's lots of joys and great interaction. That may mean there's also some pain and there's some growth in life. Okay. Now, that's a Christian understanding of marriage. A contemporary understanding of marriage. We often talk about marriage now with regard to the court, getting married in a court. And we're seeing that a lot less people are getting married in churches. It's happening all over the place. People they don't see a reason to get married in church. And why don't they see a reason to get married in church? Because they don't have a good understanding of what marriage is. It just marriage becomes some type of union that is recognized by the state. So, marriage can be man and a woman and a woman, a man and a man, and then we have debates. Then we have debates over what is marriage. Man and woman equals marriage God's way. Marriage God. So we have debates over marriage. So is this the right way? Or is this the right way? And our society is torn because marriage has been removed from its original context. From its original context of which Christ talked about it in Matthew. About how a man and woman are to be joined forever. If it's just a civil union, why not this? Why not? If the state wants to recognize it, why not? That's what people are saying right now. That's what people are saying right now. Why can't you recognize this? Why can't the state recognize this and give us tax breaks? Now, the state does have an interest in keeping up its own society, right? And growing its population. So there's that argument. There's that argument, which is a good argument. But at the same time, there's a misunderstanding. There's an incomplete understanding of what marriage is, in our society. It has become something of, well, you'll see in a second. Let me get plugged in. And now you know why we don't have it plugged in the whole time. Anyway. So this is kind of a hokey commercial, but just to watch. And watch what it says at the end. It's the most important part.
Shanti, come and meet your husband. pleasure.
So kind of a hokey little commercial, but what does it say at the end? Get used to choice. Get used to choice. So marriage now is kind of what you choose. It's kind of what you choose. It begins in the context of an arranged marriage. It begins in the context of an arranged marriage. And it may surprise us in our country, but arranged marriages are still a common thing in other countries. And they're still recognized by the church, and it's still okay. And it's still okay. And why would that be? Because you can still choose to love someone. You can still choose to commit your life to that person, regardless of whether or not you actually have gotten to like them. Has anyone seen Fiddler on the Roof? A few of you. It's a wonderful, wonderful story. Maybe I should have used it here, but it's a longer clip. And so the main character in the story, Tevye, he says to his wife, "Do you love me?" And she goes, "What?" After 25 years, and they go into this long song, and they're going back and forth. And then, because it was an arranged marriage, they had never met each other the day before. And then finally she basically says, after 25 years, if that's not love, what is? If that's not love, what is? Remaining committed to what they said yes to. Remaining committed to what they said yes to, so that now marriage in that context is not a choice. It's not just a mere choice, it's a commitment. It's a commitment of your will. It is a choice. But it's not just keeping your choices open. It's not just keeping your choices open, your options open, which is what we hear a lot in our world today. Keep your options open. Keep your options open. And that becomes an important thing. So that's just a little understanding of what marriage is to this day. It's kind of what you choose, what you want it to be, as opposed to something else. So again, going back to the slide before, it can be what you choose. Get used to choices. Get used to choosing whatever makes most sense to you, as opposed to what makes more sense for us as humans, as created beings of Christ. Okay, so the contemporary family. Here's what we have in our media. I don't know if anyone watches The Modern Family. I don't. But it's kind of, I know it's a mishmash of a lot of people and things. Again, it's just kind of whatever you want it to be. But this is what everyone is watching. This is what everyone is thinking. And it could be a very funny sitcom, I don't know. But this is what people are thinking of is a family. It's kind of whatever you want it to be. And then another symbol of the family, Family Guy, right? That would be another contemporary understanding of family. Oops. Okay, here we go. And now here is, in fact, a clip from Modern Family, the sitcom.
You are not allowed to yell at each other.
But you're allowed to yell at us?
Yes, Alex, I am, because I feed you, and I clothe you, and I pay the mortgage.
Whoa, pretty sure old Dad deserves a shout out right about now.
No.
Sorry, should have taken the temperature of the room first. What's up?
Luke and Manny barged into our room while we were changing a little.
Can I just say, in Europe, this would be no big deal.
Yeah.
You can see me in my underwear whenever you want. Here, I'll make it even.
No, hey, Luke,
Look,
Okay, girls, stop getting get so hysterical over everything? Come on! Grow up a little. I need things to start changing around here or I will change things, okay? There will be no more TV and no internet and no whatever else I can think of. May I have one with you, Phil?
I'd rather not.
So kind of a funny little clip, but there's a couple interesting cultural phenomena that I'd like to point out in that clip. Who, at the end of the, I mean, first of all, I'm sure many of you have had experiences like that in some way or the next. But who the parents are eventually, who ends up being the bad guy in that show, or in that little clip? It's Phil, the dad. It's Phil, the dad, and there's this stereotype in a lot of, watch your TV ads. Watch your TV ads. That's another great place to find this stereotype. It's here in this show that the kind of goofy person, the less serious person, kind of the child, the boy is always the father. Almost always. Almost always. It's as if the mother has to be mother of everyone. And now I've heard a lot of mothers say that I have 3 kids. Well, actually 4, because I have my husband. So I've heard that a lot. But it's a stereotype that we see a lot in TV and in shows. And it's this idea. There's this idea in part that parents have to be friends with their kids. Parents have to be friends. They kind of have to get along with them, be buddies. And frankly, I can tell you this much. I'm not buddy with my parents right now. I love them dearly, and I see them a lot, but they're not my best friends. Nor are they meant to be. But I can tell you this much. I thank God for the way they raised me. I thank God for the way they raised me and the ability they gave me to know what is most important in life. Obviously, I would say my faith and my relationship with Christ. So there's this sense that parents now have to just kind of always affirm what their children want. And that becomes problematic because children don't always know what's best. Children don't always know what's best. There's always the great line, Mom or Dad, why do we have to do this? And the answer is, because I said so. Well, sometimes that's a great response, and kids need to learn that. Because I said no. Because I said so. So there's this sense in society, to recap really quickly, that marriage can be whatever you want it to be. It can be whatever you choose marriage to be, it can be. It can be. And parents are nothing more than just essentially providers for their children. They must affirm them in every step of the way. I've heard this. If I've heard it once, it'd be, and if I got $1 for every time I heard this, I'd be a millionaire. But we don't, because you talk to some parents who maybe not be involved in their faith, and they say, well, we think our child should choose whether or not they should be baptized. We think it's a choice that they should make. And I always want to come back, but I never do because my more pastoral side, I guess, my kinder side gets the best of me. I always want to come back with, well, wait a minute, if your child is reaching towards a hot stove, are you going to pull their hand away and say, no, that's hot or that hurts? Or are you going to let them touch it and say, well, they have to choose, they have to learn? No, of course not. You're going to pull their hand away. Or if your child is playing with the scissors or a knife, you're going to quickly get it away from them. You're not going to let them keep it. Point being is you have to do what's best for your children, what you think is best for your children. So give them direction. Give them a way to live. That's the point of that. But in our society, that's quickly evaporated. Parents should let their children choose whatever they want. I'm not going to have them baptized because I'm going to let my children choose. I'm going to let my children choose how he wants to be raised or how she wants to live her life. So before I get into duties, why don't we take a quick 5 to 10 minute break if anyone wants to get up, stretch around, use the restroom, get a drink. I'm sure it can get pretty boring.